Hey everyone, it's Chase Chappell, and we are in week 4, module 1, horizontal scaling. And here's what we're going to be covering today: horizontal scaling methods and the exact processes we take for each of these methods in order to scale our results. The first one is creating an open audience. The second one is create interest audiences, create lookalike audiences, create retargeting audiences, and target additional countries. And here's where we are now. So you should have already completed phase 1, and you should have completed phase 2, which is testing. And in that phase, it's really where you're launching all of your ad variations. It's testing, your multiple different audiences and really finding out what your results are looking like. And your cost should be pretty high there in the testing phase. You might have some low numbers, but that's the testing phase. And then once you get into phase 3, optimization, that's where you really start to remove any ads that are underperforming. You should have already cut all of the ads that are not working. And you should be left with only the ads that actually have results and are getting you good results. And you should have around 1 to 3 ads per ad set. And those 1 to 3 ads should be your best ads in each of those ad sets. And you should have already been able to identify, which ad is working best. And you should have, at least one audience that is really getting you some results. And now what we're doing is basically, since we know what ads are working, we're going to start moving into scaling and finding more ways to, break into different audiences and how to basically horizontally scale so that way we can find some consistent ways to get results and the best practices to do so. So this is where we are now, which is phase 4, scaling. And the horizontal scaling methods are: horizontal scaling is basically we use horizontal scaling when we want to get more results and scale faster. And we do this to distribute spend for consistency. So rather than initially doing a linear scale, what we end up doing is going horizontal by targeting new audiences and testing different variables. And then we optimize for super low cost by doing this, because we're going to set low budgets on each of the ad sets we create. And that's going to basically allow us to, really break into different areas, but, keep the low cost present. And we're basically looking for audiences that are really going to give us those consistent results we need. And horizontal scaling helps with finding audiences that potentially can perform well. Not all of them will, but that's the point of horizontal scaling. It's so that way we can find more audiences to later scale linearly. So this is the prerequisite to scaling linearly. So the methods we use in the horizontal scaling is create open audiences, create interest audiences. We're going to do some lookalike audiences, and we're going to create retargeting and target additional countries, all in this module today. So the first one is creating an open audience. It's our control audience. You should have remembered we already created an open audience before, and we titled it the control audience. And the open audience really ends up becoming one of our most powerful audiences over time. And basically, what an open audience is it's an audience with one country and no audience actually inside of it at all. No targeting segments, no interests, no behaviors, no age, or no gender. We leave it completely open. And why we do it is we create open audiences when we have no conversions or previous data. So if you recently just launched your website, or if you just recently launched your ads and you just connected your pixel for the first time, and you really have no tracking data with your pixel, and maybe you just don't have any analytics or data or customers at all to really be able to tell, who is your customer and who should you be targeting. If that is the case and you just don't have enough data to be optimizing, what you end up doing is you end up creating the initial control audience, and everybody does this, and it really helps with, gaining further insights for targeting, and it allows you to train the pixel more so that way it can learn more. And the reason why we choose an open audience is we start with one open audience, and we then use the Facebook's algorithm to derive audiences from that. And we then derive multiple audience insights from the open audience. So let me give you an example. So whenever we launch an open audience, since there's no targeting criteria in there, the algorithm the pixel is basically going to go find, who is your current customer. So if you're selling, for example, if you're selling a home, and you're trying to get somebody to purchase a house, the pixel is basically going to go find somebody who would be interested in purchasing the house, and it does that by showing it to basically anybody and everybody in different audience clusters, basically to identify who is it that would end up buying this house. Is it people who have been living in their home for 30 years, who have dogs, who are walking? Or is it, somebody who's just recently married and all these other things? They're constantly going to Home Depot. There's a lot of criteria that the Pixel actually looks into and finds out, who is the audience. And over time, the Pixel will actually end up identifying who it is, and it'll start getting results for it. And really, when you start seeing that, you can actually look at the insights, of that open audience and basically identify like, oh, look at that. Like 95% of all of the people that we got results for are over the age of 30, and they're under the age of 40. So they're between 30 and 40. And so that basically tells you like, hey, that's the age range that we're getting results at. And that can help you further identify down the line, what type of targeting criteria should we do whenever we're trying to narrow results, so that way we can scale without having to, pay to reach people that just don't make any sense. And how we do it is we select a country and then leave the rest of the targeting criteria open. That's really, it's very simple. And the parameters for it is, when creating open audiences for the first time, you will initially see a spike in cost as the Pixel is having to use ad spend on testing to find out what audiences get the best results. And it takes on average 14 days for spending with zero. If you had zero initial results, it takes on average 14 days, spending $10 daily. And if for the Pixel to identify the best audience, if you're starting with zero conversion data. And so, if you have no previous data, the Pixel basically has to go find the people and create the data for you. So you're basically spending money during those first 14 days, basically just to get data for yourself to be able to actually, get results down the line. So in this case, you're really not hoping for, amazing results here. You're really just hoping to get some data so that way you can optimize for results. And the main purpose is to increase the Pixel's learnings, to add consistency to our ad account results over the long term. Basically, when you leave the open audience open and the Pixel is basically allowed to run free, it can just target whoever it wants to target. And that's really nice because if you cap that Pixel, it basically prevents it from really, being able to reach an audience that could potentially be your customer. So if you leave it open over time, that Pixel is basically going to start learning and getting smarter and smarter and figuring out who your customer really is. And not only that, but, the expected success timeline for this are the results become more prominent after the 14-day period, but it's really reported to have the best success after 30 days, and the open audiences become extremely consistent after 60 to 90 days. So you can really expect, around that 60 to 90 day range, like whatever result you have in that period is going to be very consistent. And what's really nice about that is, once you get consistent results there, basically you can just keep scaling up that audience and, set your target cost there and really just scale up. And that's a really nice thing to have because open audiences are good for the long term. If you want a short-term audience, it's going to die out initially and you're not going to be able to have something that actually lasts. And the benefits of the open audience is, it weathers the algorithm because any changes that happen, it doesn't matter because you have open targeting criteria. You're leaving it up to the algorithm itself to find the results. So if the algorithm changes, that's perfectly fine because you leverage it. So let me show you how we create an open audience. We end up going into our ad account, and under your campaign level, you should have your ad sets. And this is a demo account, and right here is our control audience, which is our open. And basically, if we were to look at this audience, it's basically composed of the $10 daily. We're optimizing for leads in this case, because that's the event we want. And, there's no custom audience here. There's no audience targeting. We're leaving it at the country that we're targeting in. That's the only thing we have is choose the country. We leave the age range open. We leave the gender open. We leave, you can end up putting the language in there. And then the detailed targeting, we leave open and we expand the detailed targeting criteria. Automatic placements, 7 days click. And that is exactly how we would end up setting up our open audience. And the real big benefit of this is, this thing is so big that, initially you might not see any results, but over time, the Pixel is going to learn out of this big group, who is it in this group that has the best results? And this audience becomes really scalable down the line. So the second thing we do is we would create interest audiences. the only reason we would create interest audiences is really if you have no previous data. And what I mean by that is if you would just recently launch your Pixel and you just don't have, a long enough time period of customer data. If you've been in business for a year and you have like 100 plus customers, that's data, and you should directly roll into lookalikes. But if you're not in that scenario where you don't have, tons of customers, you don't have tons of analytics, you don't know exactly who it is that's buying your product, and you just don't have the data you need, well, you can initially start with interest audiences. And this is a way to scale as well if you run out of targeting ideas down the line. So what it is basically an audience that has a specific interest, behavior, or someone who is self-identified. And the reason we do it is we create interest audiences to identify further opportunities to gather results, because we always want to be improving our Pixel and giving it information. And, once we gather enough conversion data for the Pixel, we immediately focus on lookalikes and custom audiences to try to avoid targeting future interest. And the reason is because the parameters are interest audiences are less likely to be removed by Facebook if the audience is over 1 million. You see, when the audience size is less than 1 million, it has the chance of being removed. Reason is Facebook is always trying to make sure that, the audience size isn't too small, because if it is, there's room for segmentation, which could be against policy. And it basically means, politicians or anything, in these different sectors where people can target a very specific group of people, and they just don't like that. They like to make sure that the audience size is over 1 million. So it's really best if you choose an interest over that size, because if you come under, you run the chance of, that interest being removed. And just recently, I'll give you an example. There was over 5,000 interests removed, and they were all under the audience size 1 million. And those 5,000 interests, there was people targeting those interests. And as long as you were just targeting one of those 5,000, and even if you were getting the best results, that was your best interest audience, and that was like your best results ever, it doesn't matter because they removed it. So therefore, you're left without, not only your best campaign interest targeting criteria, but you're also like left empty-handed on like, where do I go next? Because you're completely banking on that one specific thing. And that doesn't leverage the algorithm. It's your interest audiences are always chosen and selected by you. It's basically relying on human, how educated and understanding you are of who the customer is to identify who's going to end up taking a result. And, with machine learning and how everything's working with Facebook now, the algorithm is outpacing humans 10 to 1. So it's really best to leverage the algorithm in terms of results. And the main purpose of interest audiences is basically for us to gain further insights and data so we can better leverage the custom audiences and lookalikes. So we'd end up launching some interest audiences, and as soon as we get some results and we get enough conversions, we'd instantly want to start using custom and lookalike audiences. And the expected success timeline for interest audiences it takes, at least 7 days for you to start seeing results. And interest audiences have historically shown to be inconsistent and have had the highest chance of being removed. And what I mean by that is, interest audiences, since they have let's say the audience size is 1.2 million and you're targeting Zillow and the audience size is 1.2 million, what ends up happening is like that audience size doesn't change very much. Because people are having to self-identify or show an interest in that for them to be put into that audience. So since that audience is so, it's very stagnant in terms of like how much it's changing, you can really max out that audience pretty quickly. So you'll get some results initially, but you'll run out of people to target. And not only that, but since interest audiences are readily available to any Facebook advertiser to select, and trust me, all the beginners select interest audiences, what ends up happening is you have a massive amount of competition because you have like thousands of different advertisers all targeting the exact same interest. And that becomes a problem because you become even more consumed and having to compete. And when you leverage, lookalikes and your own data, you're actually creating your own custom audiences that, people can't target your custom audience. They can only overlap with you. And that improves your odds of, getting really successful results a lot earlier on. And, since interest audiences have a high chance of being inconsistent, they're actually really not a part of our greater four-phase system. but they are a way to jumpstart initial results when data is needed. So they're totally okay to use if you're looking to scale in terms of trying to find some more audiences that might work, or if you're really in need of getting some more data so that way you can start using lookalikes, then this is a perfect place to start. But it's really important that you try to get into the lookalikes and find a lookalike that's really working, because interest audiences tend to wear out pretty quickly. Number 3 is creating lookalikes, and we're actually going to show you how to do the interest-based targeting. And what I have here is a conversions interest campaign, and there's just a few targeting in here, and I'll show you what it looks like. So basically, if we're going to set up a interest-based targeting, we'd end up launching the ad set. We'd set the daily budget. On interest, it's typically recommended to either do $5 daily or $10 daily initially to start out with. Because you're probably going to have to test a lot of different ad sets for interest just to basically find out who it is that the audience is most likely to convert for you. And you can end up putting in targeting criteria. It's recommended that you do 1 per ad set. And the reason is you're not going to be able to identify the best interest if you have multiple. So let's say we did, social media marketing, digital marketing, online marketing, because we're trying to sell like a marketing product. And it says include people who match one of the following. Well, our audience might only purchase from the digital marketing interest. Maybe our audience is the digital marketing. But since we have all these selected in here, we're really not able to tell where the results are coming from. So whenever we're getting results on this, we could end up being, we won't be able to tell which interest is it that's working. So in order for us to really, segment this so that way we can be able to get the information we need to make educated decisions, you want to leave 1 interest per ad set. Then you can title your ad set interest by the name, and that's going to allow you to really know what is it that's working in terms of results. So if this digital marketing one or this online marketing one ends up working out for us, then we'll basically say, okay, well, if that's working, let's go ahead and test internet marketing one in a different ad set, and we'll duplicate it. And then we can just keep going on from there. So with interest targeting, there's really a few ways that you can end up figuring out, how is it that you want to target people. You can go down to the age. So a lot of times people, when we leave the age range completely open, let's say we did 18 to 65, and this is a lead-based business, and we're trying to sell a digital marketing product, and we noticed that every person that's over the age of 50, we've noticed everybody who's past this age has never purchased, and they've always all said that it's too expensive, or they don't know how to use the product, or there's just so many things that they have no interest in it. But for some reason they used our ad and they became a lead, but once they find out what the product's really about, they have no interest. And it's only people who are over age 50. Well, if that's the case, then we just start targeting moving forward. Since we found that out, we just choose 18 to 50, and we wouldn't target anybody over the age of 50 anymore, because we found out people who are over 50 just don't want our product. And that really helps with, if you're 100% sure that there's a specific targeting criteria that is not your audience at all, then feel free to exclude that. But if you don't know, then there's no reason to start targeting, limiting your targeting. If you don't know who your customer is, even if you might or slightly know, it doesn't matter. You don't want to go based off a guesstimate. You 100% want to be able to be certain that of the age targeting criteria as well as the gender. You have to be certain before you end up deciding to choose the targeting, and that's really why you get the test. And you can end up looking at your data and find out who is it that is most commonly purchasing. And that's a way that you can do some horizontal scaling, and setting it to $5 daily and $10 daily is really nice, because that allows you to keep the budgeting small and be able to test multiple ad sets and interest at the same time. So that is how we end up doing interest-based targeting. and it's recommended with the interest-based targeting the moment that you end up getting some results and you have enough conversion data that you instantly try to start focusing on lookalikes. So number 3, create lookalike audiences. And the more conversion volume you have, the more accurate your lookalike audience becomes. So what is it? An audience that looks like our current customers and people who took a specific action on our website. So basically what this means is if you're optimizing for purchases, you would create a lookalike based off of that specific action, which the action would be, they completed a purchase. So we create a lookalike based off purchases. And it's going to go find people who look just like those current customers of yours. It's going to find anybody who, made a purchase on your website. What it's going to do is find people who are super similar to that exact person who made the purchase. And the reason why we do that is because creating lookalike audiences allows us to rapidly expand our audience size and threshold spend. And the lookalike audiences change as results come in and constantly refresh on their own, saving us time and ad spend. And what I mean by that is basically the more purchases you're getting on your website, since the lookalike is of the people who are purchasing, every single time a new person purchases, the lookalike is always changing because it's always improving itself. The more people who purchase, it's like, okay, the pixel's starting to notice everybody's in the age range 30, so it cycles basically all the people in the lookalike who are outside of that age range out, and it starts bringing in more people who are in that age range. And it gets super specific. It gets laser focused. They'll start focusing on different areas, and the lookalike changes on its own. And we don't have to constantly be editing our audiences and finding new interests when they die out. Because if we're focusing on lookalikes, the lookalike can actually last years. I mean, the thing can go on for a long time. As long as you're getting a good volume of people taking actions on your site, your lookalike's always going to be following the behavior and the actual customer information it needs to be able to create a good audience itself. And that's really nice. And why lookalike audiences? Well, we use the Facebook's algorithm to derive the audiences themselves. It gives us the ability to reach an even larger audience size that is constantly being updated. And how we do it is basically we'll create a lookalike once you have had at least 100 page views. You'll create a lookalike on page views. And you'll do a lookalike on your leads, 100 leads. And basically, you'll start from the top of your funnel and just keep creating lookalike audiences and, creating these ad sets to really identify which lookalikes are performing best. And once you had at least 100 purchases, create a lookalike based on purchases. You start at the top of your funnel and create lookalikes at each stage. And as soon as it has a sufficient number of conversions, 100 plus needed, but 1,000 plus is recommended. That's Facebook's recommended. But people, all day long will create lookalikes on 100 plus and get results. And, there's many students in here who have created lookalikes with 100 plus, leads or page views and have already saw results. And the parameters are for lookalikes. The first time, when we first create them, we're going to want to start with 1% audiences. And that basically just means, it tells the lookalike to find 1% of the people who look most closely resembled to your actual audience. And once you've tested and proven the lookalikes at 1%, try 1 to 2% in a separate ad set. And if it works, keep going up. Just try 2 to 3%, 3 to 4%. Just keep testing the different lookalikes until you find, different lookalikes that are performing really well. And this is going to help a lot with scaling, because if each one of these are working, you're able to increase your spend significantly, and you're adding about 1.2 million people, and up. In some cases, you can get up to 2.4 and go all the way up to 10 million people really quickly just by doing this. And that's going to allow you to reach a ton of new audiences and allow you to spend a lot more money on getting results in terms of, getting good results. And the main purpose for this is to use your own data to create lookalike audiences. And this helps avoid competition and constant rising interest cost, because, interest targeting ends up being increased because the data is having to be pulled from, third parties as well as different areas. So that cost ends up being passed on to the people who end up targeting those interests. And the main purpose of the lookalike audiences also helps us leverage the algorithm to provide you with consistency and long-term growth. So typically lookalike audiences perform a lot longer and will last a lot longer than interest audiences ever would. And the expected success timeline is results tend to become more prominent after 4 to 7 days with lookalike audiences. And the best results are reported when lookalike audiences are able to gather more than 50 conversion events within 7 days. So basically, if you have, you're optimizing for leads, if you can get 50 leads within a week, your lookalike audience will be able to have the perfect amount of data to be able to optimize. And that's going to really help with getting great results. Now, if you get under 50 conversions, that's totally okay too, because you can still get a lot better results than you would be able to with other audience types. But as you know, the more conversion volume you have, the more accurate your lookalike audience becomes. So you want to shoot for that 50 conversion events if you can. And number 4, and we'll also cover lookalikes. And so right here we have our 1%, and this is actually the top of our funnel, which is anybody who's viewed the actual, website, and we retarget different audiences. And in this one, in case, it's page views and it's 30 days. So we go here, we create a custom audience first. You would end up selecting website traffic. And you're not only going to want to test 30 days, but you're going to want to test 60 days. And you're going to want to test 180 days. And the reason is because, 180 days, you might have enough data for your lookalike to have enough information to be able to optimize really effectively. And if you don't have enough data and you do the 30 days, it might perform not as well as the 180. But the exact opposite can happen as well. 30 days data has a lot of relevant information. So your audience type might have changed and 30 days might be the best. That's why it's important that we test all of them so that way we can really identify, which lookalike is going to perform in the best case scenario. And then you'll name it your 1% and you'll create that audience. And then what you would end up doing is hit lookalike, and you would select that audience and you would choose your location and you would leave it at 1%. And then you can test a 1 to 2% and you create that. And then you can test 2 to 3%. And the reason we do it this way is because it excludes these audiences. So basically, you're able to create multiple audiences without overlapping your own audience types. And this really helps significantly with, keeping your ad sets from not competing with themselves. And it also helps you find and scale even further by reaching even more people. And as long as this is working, you just keep moving up in the ladder. And then you could create lookalikes for your view content if they actually viewed your product. And then you create lookalikes for people who became leads, as well as schedules, as well as purchases. You can create lookalikes for basically any event you have on your website. Now we are covering retargeting audiences. And in the retargeting audiences, they're best used when targeting non-converters and current customers. So what it is basically an audience of people who have completely completed any event other than our actual optimization goal event. So if we're optimizing for purchases, if they completed the add to cart but didn't complete the purchase, then we're going to retarget them. And a retargeting campaign is basically an audience of people who have completed any other event other than that actual optimization goal. And the reason we do it is to increase conversions, capture non-converters, and upsell current customers. And how we do it is we create a custom audience for page views and deeper funnel action events. And if it works, we continue to move forward in the funnel, testing, more retargetings. And if it doesn't, then we'll still test deeper funnel events, because you want to test each of these events because, each one is going to have a unique audience in it. And each event that gets deeper in your funnel is going to be more qualified. So it's probably going to, the deeper retargeting you do in your funnel, the more likely that you're going to get low cost. And the parameters for this is when creating retargeting for the first time, we initially create a 30-day audience. And then we test 60-day and 180-day. And we spend $2.50 daily if the audience size is less than 100 people. And we'll spend $5 daily if the audience size is between 100 and 1,000. And we'll spend $10 daily if the audience size is between 1,000 and 10,000 people. And the only reason you would go higher than $10 daily on that on the retargeting audience is if you end up having 10,000 people. For every additional 10,000 people you have, it's $10 daily. So the main purpose is to increase conversions, capture non-converters. You can upsell current customers and increase returning customers. And the success timeline is, it becomes more prominent after 4 to 7 days. You'll see results. And the best results are reported when custom audience sizes are above 1,000 for retargeting. So let's look at how we create some retargeting. All right, so for retargeting, how we end up doing this is we'll go ahead and create a new campaign. We'll start over, and for retargeting, you end up choosing conversions, and we can go ahead and just name this conversions retargeting. And you'll hit continue. And then we're going to choose our event that we want to retarget at customers, and we'll start off with we want to choose the event at which you want people to convert at. So like basically if you want purchases, then choose that purchase event. And if you want leads, then just choose leads. Then we're going to create a custom audience, and it's going to be website traffic and all website visitors. We'll start with 180 days. Because basically, like anybody who visited your site like 70 days ago, 100 days ago, 150 days ago, like some of those people might have fallen out of one of your audiences and like maybe generally wanted to purchase or become a lead, but they never got around to doing it, or they just ended up, leaving the site for whatever reason. They got distracted. This is going to help us, get back in front of them. It's going to increase your brand awareness and basically remind them like, hey, we're still around, and it's going to help significantly at recovering some of these people who are long forgotten, or even people who have already purchased from you, loved your product, and want to buy it again or recommend it to a friend, but they forgot. So, if you capture these people who have forgotten, they're going to say, oh, I remember this product, or I remember this person, I want to buy from them, or I want to recommend them to somebody, and they're going to do that. And that really happens when you get very far out in this 180 days. And that is the maximum time slot, and I'm glad it is, because you don't want to go any further than that. So you would end up naming this all website visitors. $180 days, and you would create that audience. And then you just leave it there. And then you're going to leave this open because there's no sense in limiting a retargeting. And the only other thing we're going to change is, turning off the expand detailed targeting, because basically, we don't want it to expand and increase the targeting range because we're retargeting our customers, or we're retargeting people who didn't convert from our site. Like, we don't want to reach new people who've never heard of us in the retargeting campaign. The purpose of the retargeting is reaching the people who've already seen us or shown intent to purchase. So we got to isolate that. And a lot of times people ask the question like, do we end up excluding, purchases when we're doing like an add to cart retargeting? And the answer to that is no. And the reason is because there's so many times where you can actually retarget somebody who just recently purchased from you, and they're going to purchase again. If you have a good product or you have a good service and it's something that they, would be inclined to buy again, or, share with their friends, you don't want to exclude them. And there's no sense in excluding people who are your most qualified customers. Now, this might be a retargeting to get them to do the same action again, but that's totally fine, because if they end up taking it, that's great. So that's actually welcome. So there's no sense in excluding that specifically. And then we'll just leave the targeting criteria open. And if you're targeting multiple countries, then you're just going to create multiple retargeting campaigns for each country. There's no sense in stacking them unless you're trying to, increase your audience size. So in this case, we're less than 1,000 people in this audience. That's totally okay. And if we're under 1,000 for the spend, what we're going to do is we're going to lower our spend. And we'll do $5 daily on this one, because it's less than 1,000. And we're going to do 7 days click. because basically as long as this person converts within 7 days, that works for us. And then we can name this retargeting 180 days. And then we just hit continue and we'd end up creating our ad. And then you could basically repeat this process for 30 days and 60 days. And you would end up, testing to see which ones perform best. And you would end up using the module in week 3 on, how to cut underperforming ad sets, and you would just turn off your underperforming ad set and only leave the ones that work. And that's basically like, you're scaling because you're increasing your spend, you're finding more audiences that work, and you're also optimizing at the same time because you're turning off ad sets that don't. So the next one is target additional countries. And targeting additional countries is best used when you have hit a plateau or if you're looking to rapidly expand audience sizes to scale. And what it is basically an additional country we target to further scale and expand our conversions. And the reason we do it is to expand our audience size. So basically, if we're just getting results super consistently in one country and we're just not able to increase it anymore because we're just reaching a ton of people and our specific audience is just being maxed out, and if we raise our spend anymore or if we do any type of scaling in our current country, it just starts spiking our results. If that's the case, then we'd end up looking for additional countries to target. And how we do it is we basically initially target similar countries to our current targeted ones. And we can repeat this process for open audiences and lookalikes within that new country. So basically we'd start from the beginning of our horizontal scaling process and create all these different audiences for the new country as well to find out, what works best. And that's really going to, increase the amount of opportunities and increase your spending significantly. And that's really going to help you scale. And the parameters are, once you have encountered a plateau in an initial country, you can repeat the audience scaling process in an additional new country to further scale results. And the expected success timeline for this is results tend to become more prominent after 7 days of testing. And the best results are reported when enough audience testing has happened for at least 30 days. Now, not all countries are going to work, but it's important that you choose ones that are very similar to the ones you're currently targeting in. And the way we do this is we basically would simply start in our ad set. And instead of doing the United States for this instance, we would choose Canada. And, why would we end up choosing Canada? Well, Canada is literally right next to the United States. They're also an English-speaking country, and a lot of Canadians have a lot of common interest with people who are in the States, and we're able to sell to people in Canada. Our products and services can be sold there, and so therefore, since that's the case, we're just gonna create an ad set that's focused on Canada and see how the results go. And we'll initially start with creating our control audience, and we'll just leave this one open. And then we would end up launching this one for $5 or $10 daily, depending on what your marketing budget is. And then you just hit continue and create your ads. And that's how you would end up scaling with targeted countries. So here's what we covered. We covered the horizontal scaling methods, which basically is, instead of linearly increasing the amount of spend, if you're wanting to find new audiences, you would end up using these methods. And this is really going to help you find out which audience types are going to be most consistent for you. So you would start with, creating your open audiences. You would end up, if you don't have any data or you're looking to scale because you're maxed out on the lookalike audiences you've created, then you would end up rolling into interest. And then as soon as you get some interests that are really performing, if you had no data and now you're getting it, then you would go straight into lookalikes because those are going to be your most consistent audiences over time. And they, are your own lookalikes. They're built off your own data. So that's really nice. And then number 4 is creating retargeting audiences. You'll create retargeting to retarget people who didn't convert. And you will be retargeting people who did convert because they might repurchase or, they suddenly became a qualified lead. Maybe, if you're not selling a product, you're doing a service, like you're like selling a home, for instance, and you sold a home to someone, like there's no reason to exclude them, because like maybe they end up wanting to purchase another home. You know, you never know what things happen to people. I mean, they could have hit the lotto and they're like, you sold me an amazing home. I want you to go buy me. I want you to show me a new house that I can buy. And like, there's instances like that happen every day, all day long. So like, there's really no reason to exclude your current paying customers, because, you know, a lot of times they might end up converting. If you have another service or a different product, they might say, you know, I love your service so much that I want you to do this for me. If you have an agency and you sold them on like a training, like a one-on-one session, they might end up like calling you and say, hey, like I want you to manage it as well, and here's what I want to do because I saw your retargeting ad. So like there's no sense in like excluding anybody in that sense. And then the next thing is targeting additional countries. So we do this whenever we hit a plateau or if we're looking to rapidly expand our audience size because we're wanting to scale even further. And this is recommended to do, you know, target similar countries. Start with countries that are have the same language that are most commonly spoken there, and then also like look for like what are some things in each of these countries that have in common interest with the one that I'm already getting great results in. And once you do that, you would end up repeating the process for our scaling methods on horizontal scaling to find new opportunities. And so that's basically how horizontal scaling works. It's a quick way to optimize for low cost and find new opportunities very quickly. And make sure to refer to, you know, week 3's module where we talk about ad set optimization, which is actually cutting any of those underperforming ones. Because when you do horizontal scaling, you want to make sure you also cut the ones that don't perform well. And over time, you'll end up finding the audiences that are going to be consistent, and you'll start to see results like, you know, coming in, and that's going to help you scale. So I look forward to seeing you on the next module. Thank you.